Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be super fun. Looking forward to talking about the differences between Cove Life and Big Water Life. And obviously when we're talking about relocating or purchasing a home or finding that lakefront property, location is obviously always super important, right? So where do we want the property? Do we want it in the middle of all the congestion and a lot of hustle and bustle? Do we want it to be convenient and to be close to grocery stores and amenities and schools and hospitals? Or do we want it further away from those amenities and we want a little bit of separation? So once we figure out where we want the property to be, there's always a fun debate and maybe back and forth between, do I want to live on the big water or do I want to be tucked inside of a cove? And both of those scenarios are going to have pros and cons, things to think about, all the stuff that I always talk about, right? There's a fun, healthy debate, especially when we have a husband who feels one way and a wife who feels the other way, and to listen to them kind of go back and forth. Both of them make really good points because you could certainly see life both ways, but you have to maybe think about a couple things and consider some things along the way. So where I want to start is trying to put together the best explanation that I can for really the size of this lake. And when you're looking at it from a Google perspective, right? So you've got a map pulled up. What you're going to see is, again, this ancient Chinese looking dragon, right? So it swivels into an S shape, and then you have the legs that go down into Camdenton, and you have the tail, which goes far back to Warsaw. And so that shape, S shape, is the main channel, okay? So that main channel that is the big body water of this lake is massive. It's deceiving how big it actually is. So on a map, it looks like it could be small or narrow, and that main channel is actually very big. And so outside of the main channel, you then have all these little fingers that stick out of it, right? So you have all these fingers all over the place. And again, from a map perspective, those fingers look like they're coves. They're tiny little fingers, and maybe you have to go slow when you're inside of those fingers, and no wake zones, kind of stuff like that. But those fingers are actually probably really good sized lakes. You can ski, you can boat, you can tube, wakeboard, you can do a whole bunch of stuff inside of those fingers because, again, it looks like they're small, but they're actually, again, really good sized lakes. And off of those fingers and those lakes, then you have little coves that stir off of that. And so it's hard to probably articulate the size of it. So I'm trying to do my best. Big body main channel. You got the fingers that come off of it. Those fingers are big enough to go skiing in. They're good sized lakes. And then off of those fingers, you're going to have little coves. And so it's hard to probably see, which is why I'm always encouraging you to come down and check it out. But the size of it can certainly be deceiving. So moving past just the size of it, the question is always, do we want to live in the coves? Do we want to live on the big water? And again, certainly they're going to have some pros and cons. And so let's think about Cove Life, right? So the benefits to the Cove Life is, it's a little bit separated from that big water. And that big water main channel can be very choppy. It can be very wavy, right? This is a seawall lake. So as waves go out, they kind of hit the seawall and then they roll back in, right? Roll out, roll in, and that creates buildup. And that main channel can be very choppy and can also be busy. A lot of boats going back and forth and trying to make their way to restaurants and bars and travel and all that kind of stuff. And so tucked inside of a cove, you have probably a little bit more peace, and it's a little bit more tranquil, and it's a little bit calmer water. And so you have a little bit of protection from that big water kind of activity. And depending on who you are, right? Like, again, I have young kiddos, and a lot of times we hang out in coves because we're trying to protect ourselves from the big boats and the big channel and the big waves. And so coves provide you that type of protection. Now, again, if you're hanging out in a finger, a finger is still going to have busy waterways, right? Because there's still boating, there's still skiing and tubing. Those are big lakes that people can still ski and do those things in. And then the coves are kind of splintered off of those fingers. And so tucked inside of those coves, you have a little bit of, seclusion. You have some peaceful waters, some calming vibes. You have some protection from that big water chop. You also have protection from your dock. And, the dock kind of game down here is certainly unique, right? Because, you could buy a $500,000 house and you could probably have $100,000 dock too. And if you're tucked inside of a cove, it's probably not that big of a deal, right? Your dock could need a little work. Your dock could be, 1/2-inch steel instead of full inch. You could have a lower level of structure of dock because you're not dealing with as big of waves. And so those are some really good vibes, right? Those are really good positive feelings when you think about being tucked into a cove. And kids are swimming off the docks and they're playing in the water, and you don't have to worry about a lot of that big water kind of stuff. And so being kind of tucked in, again, it's a little calmer, it's a little more peaceful. You're protected from that big water stuff. Your family can swim and play easier. You can still do that on the big water, but you can do it a little bit easier than maybe out on the big water. And then again, the dock protection, you don't have as much wear and tear and waves crashing and dock rocking kind of movement if you're kind of tucked into a cove. And so there's definitely some advantages by being tucked in and kind of isolated from that big water. And then I think some of the disadvantages could also be some of the advantages, right? You are tucked into a cove. You are isolated a little bit. And, a lot of people don't feel like they live at Lake of the Ozarks when they're tucked into a tiny cove, right? So when you look out your back deck, or you're looking off your dock and you can see, the other side of the cove or neighbors' houses around you, you might not feel like you live on this massively big lake. And there's a large amount of people that come down that want to see the lake, right? They want big, massive views. They want to see the size of what this lake is. And so as much as being in a cove is an advantage from protection, it could also be a disadvantage from seeing the beauty of what this lake is. And so, being out on the main channel or being close to that big body of water, you are clearly going to have some big, expansive views, right? So huge views of the lake and the rolling hills and mountains behind it. You could be sitting up on a cliff or a bluff or having an elevated position. Huge advantage by just being on the big water and being able to see the big water as clearly as you can. And, when you are on that main channel and you're hanging out on the back deck or you're hanging out on your dock, you're also going to have a lot of activity, right? And people want to feel that activity. They want to see big boats going by. And there's a lot of them down here. So you have these kind of big yachts. You have these big power boats with, 5 motors hanging off the back of them. You have loud noise from those, and it's kind of cool to see. And so if you're on the main channel, you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to have some excitement kind of going back and forth constantly. And so definitely some advantages or maybe some pros when you are on that big channel water, just from the activity that you can see. Now, you are also going to have to be considerate of your dock and what the maintenance of that can look like, right? Because you can't have kind of a weak structured dock. You're gonna need something that can handle, the waves and the chop and the busyness. And most of the docks that are already out there on the main channel, they've been there and they've they've survived the big water. And so there's probably not a whole lot of concern. But if you did find a property and you feel like the dock is not adequate and, it's beat up a little bit, it needs some work and some repair, you got to think about what that extra cost is. You'll be pleasantly surprised and maybe a little shocked on how much it can cost to replace a dock or repair a dock. And so, again, you got to kind of consider, what kind of life do I want? Do I want to be, tucked into a cove, having the protection of that? Do I want to see the big water and see the big boats and have big views? Your dock is going to feel the impact of both of those. And on that main channel with the type of traffic and boat waves, you're certainly going to need a dock that can handle that type of wave. As you're trying to weigh pros and cons on living in the cove, living on the big water, you could also attempt to try to find a property very similar to where I currently live. So we are right on the edge of a cove, right? So I've talked about it. We're mile marker 42. And as you move down there, you find this little tiny cove, or this finger, I should say. It's a finger off of the main channel. And we're right on the edge of it. And so when we look out to our right, we see big water and all of the views that you could have. And then when you go to the left, you start to tuck yourself into the cove and you're kind of on the edge of it. Now, I wish I was a little further into the finger, right? Because being on the edge means I still have to handle the big waves, the rocking of the dock, right? I still have to be very considerate of big water movement, but then I also have a little bit of a protection of the cove. So it's kind of best of both worlds. But if I was a little further in and I didn't have to deal with as much chop, that would probably be ideal. The problem with all of that is, inventory, right? If you want the best of both worlds, like I want a little bit of protection inside of a finger, inside of a cove, but I want to be able to look out and see the big water and some of the boats, you certainly can. It's just, is that property going to pop up in the time frame that you're looking for? And I guess it depends on your time frame for purchase, right? Got to move right now, or do I have a little bit of time to shop and find the perfect property? And the perfect property is out there, whether it's tucked into a cove, whether it's on a finger, or whether it's on the main channel, right? And it'll be fun to kind of help you navigate those things and look at those properties. But certainly, from a map perspective, this lake is bigger than what you're seeing. That main channel is massive. Off of that main channel, you have finger lakes. Those lakes are big. You can boat inside of those. Plenty of room for, wakeboarding and skiing and tubing and surfing. Big lakes that come off of that main channel. And then you have these little coves that come off of those fingers. And so being tucked into those coves or maybe off on one of those fingers certainly is going to have some advantages with just dealing with the waves, the chop. You'll have a little bit of protection from big water. And if your family is swimming and hanging off the docks and doing things, there's a little bit more safety involved with that. Tucked inside of those fingers and coves, a lot of people will go fishing. And so the fishing is maybe better inside of those coves. And a lot of those things that are beneficial from maybe the lifestyle you're looking to live, maybe a little bit of the separation from the big water, a little bit of protection and safety, less dock maintenance by having a property that doesn't have to deal with that big water chop. But man, there are some advantages to being out on that main channel as well. If you have a dock that's already there and has been handling that water and is made of kind of concrete and steel, then it's not going to be a problem. And plus, if you have a big boat, like a cruising type boat or a big pontoon, it can handle all of that stuff, right? And if you are out on that main channel, your views are going to be amazing. They are the best views in my mind being out on the main channel. We just don't have, that dock ain't going to handle it, and our boat isn't big enough to live out there constantly. But man, for those that we help relocate to the big channel, I am in awe of their views. They have an amazing setup. to wake up and go to bed with, sunrises and sunsets over this massive body of water is phenomenal. And so fun little video talking about some of the pros and cons. There's definitely advantages, things to think about, but for sure, if we're relocating and making that purchase and we want to be on that big water, we have to be mindful of the condition of your dock, right? Because we don't want to buy a property and then all of a sudden have to spend 50 grand to upgrade, repair your dock, or who knows, 100 grand to replace it completely. So be mindful of that. And then it's just a healthy debate between which one's better, pros and cons, husbands, wives, right? Who's thinking about the lifestyle that they want to live when they do the relocation. So super fun video, obviously a super fun conversation, even more fun to show you these properties in person. So whatever we can do to help answer your questions, show you Cove Life, show you Big Water Life, obviously we would love to do that. So call me, text me, email me, reach out and ask me any questions that I can hopefully help you with. And until then, we'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.